Okay, here we go.
I know, right? Action. Welcome to Talking Peace Radio at Western New York Peace Center, being recorded here at Think Twice Radio, the home of Think Twice Radio, also the home of Richard Wicca. Thank you, Richard. And we also like to thank our friends at Buff State. Thank you, Buff State. And in the spirit of thankfulness, we like to, here on Talking Peace, we give a land acknowledgement, remembering that we are on unceded land of the indigenous people. So they like to start every event off with being thankful. So we just want to say thank you to everyone here. Thank you for the people, the earth. Thank you to Sierra for coming here. And thank you to our creator who has breathed life into us. Today we have on here Sierra.
Yeah.
She works at a digital newspaper at Williamsville.
Yeah.
And she took a class on conflict management at Kenmore Alliance Church. So today we're going to be talking about resolving conflict in our everyday life, mainly just like in in relationships that we may have with our parents, spouses or friends, neighbors. You can list. You have multiple different relationships. So just not how to navigate when conflict arises, because conflict is inevitable. So we do start off with like some of the values that we hold. So what are some values that you hold and you think that would be valuable to this conversation?
Yeah. Thank you for asking. So some values I hold when I think of conflict, one of the first things is that it's not always bad, because sometimes you can learn from it.
Right.
But something that I really believe is that you can like honor our creator in the way you handle it, and that you don't have to be rude to people. Like you can show so much love in how you handle a conflict and grow as a person.
Yeah, so true.
So,
yeah, that's actually like what the heart of our conversation is, like how conflict is not always a bad thing. Like it can be used, especially like, of course there's things that can erupt that do cause bad things to happen, but usually conflict can be as an opportunity to see things that you didn't see before. It usually leads to like a shift in perspective. So some values that I would like to bring to the conversation is I value like self-reflection, and being able to look back on like what has happened in the past and learn from your mistakes. I also want to think about the value of like just releasing the desire to have power or the desire to be right in every single scenario. I think a lot of times it's so easy to think that we are always in the right, and that's not the case. And something that Miss Vicky always says, like when she comes and does host the show, she's always like quotes Martin Luther King, and one of his quotes is, "Unarmored truth and conditional love will have the final word in reality." So just remembering like the value of truth and love will always have that final say. So
if you don't mind me adding on a little bit,
course,
I thought of something. Another thing I think about is like the power of our words along with self-discipline, because if we don't have control over I almost said our lungs, over our words, that too. Words have the power to speak life and to speak death into our lives, into other people's lives, whether or not we realize it. So really like taming our tongue and thinking before we speak, but also listening to another person and thinking about what they may be in, I think is super important.
Yeah, having empathy and it's really hard to tame your tongue. Like I struggle with that personally, like because when you get in like moments of anger, you kind of just like say the first things that come to your head, and then you end up saying things that you wish you regret. And it's very important to like take a step back and like kind of be self-aware in those moments and be like, okay, what is the best way? Because it's not about what you say, it's about how you say it.
Yeah.
And your words do have a lot of power, not only like when you're talking to other people, but like in the spiritual realm, like your words can like it can really penetrate and hurt people.
Oh,
so
yeah.
yeah. But I also want to like discuss because in church today we lit the second candle of Advent, peace, and we were talking about peace. Yeah, I was like, oh my gosh, it's such a coincidence.
Yeah.
But it was good to like see like where my pastor was talking about like definitions of peace and what peace is, and I have some definitions of peace if you want to hear them. So it says peace, it does not mean to be in a place where there is no noise, trouble, or hard work. It means to be in the midst of all those things and still be calm in your heart.
Yeah.
So that's just one definition. I don't know who the author is. It's kind of unknown.
Yeah.
Nelson Mandela said, peace is not just the absence of conflict. Peace is the creation of an environment where all can flourish regardless of race, color, creed, religion, gender, class, caste, or any other social marks of differences. And then the Webster Dictionary, it says that the state of tranquility, or peace is the state of tranquility or a quiet or freedom of disturbance. So yeah, those are just a few definitions that I wrote down. But what do you think? You know, it can mean so many things.
Yeah.
So what do you think?
So when I was reflecting, one of the things I said is peace has this stillness in your heart, because we have so many burdens in our everyday lives. And just if you can get to this point where it's not, like you had said, like based on all your circumstances, because you can have a lot going on, but still have peace, and that peace can lead into joy. And I think a lot of times we confuse joy with happiness, because you'll be like, oh, well, this happened. Like, I'm really sad right now. But in those moments, like something I learned when I couldn't walk was I had so much joy because of what I put my hope and my faith in, even though so much of my world felt like it was falling apart. Because I was like, well, I can't drive. I can't walk around, and I love to be active. It's one of my favorite things. I couldn't help shovel our driveway when the blizzard happened. I couldn't get up and just help out with the dogs, all sorts of things or I couldn't even get upstairs by myself. Wow. And I needed help showering because I couldn't use my arm either.
That's crazy.
And like, it was heavy.
Right. So, and you had like, it felt like your whole world was like, kind of like everything was being, that you were capable of, as everything was just like taken away from you. And then there's just like this disturbance of your peace. And that's kind of like, you know, it brings you to a place where you have to like find this internal peace. And how did you go about finding that? Yeah,
so I first had the struggle of my freedom, my identity's been taken away because that's how I live my everyday life. And so I really took the time, like you were talking about, is to reflect, be aware of what's going on in my heart, and to identify my emotions, because I forget what part of your brain it is. That is the logic piece. I don't want to mess it up.
I know it's like something with the left side, because I know your left side of your brain is like where the logic, or no, that's the creativity, and then it's your right side. Yeah.
And so something I've learned is from Ken Sande, who wrote a book that we talked about. Is he talks about first identifying your emotion, because once you start to bring logic into things, you can start to think a little bit more clearly and process stuff. So it's identifying your emotions and then thinking, why do I feel this way? What's this root cause? And so through doing that, I had realized that I put my identity in my legs and my arms, in my not active ability. Ability to be active. And it went deep into this idol of control, because I was like, well, this is what I always do, and I know better. I know the best. I know what I need. I know what I want. But, like, I was praying about it, and God said to me, he goes, well, like, not audibly, but the question was, what do you value the most? Is it me, or is it your legs? Is it me, or is it your ability to drive? Is it me, or is it the way that people look at you when you can't walk, when you have to use a handicap parking pass, when you just... Like, I'm in my 20s, and people are like, well, a 20-year-old shouldn't have this happen. I go, I know. Yeah. But when I constantly thought about all the negatives, it just chained me down. I felt like I was drowning.
Wow.
And so I just prayed a lot because I was like, God, I don't want to live this way. And I prayed, one of the things I prayed for was peace and for joy, because I know that's out of my control. And no matter how much I want something to happen, I can't just think that into existence. I can't say, well, I really want to walk, and then boom, I'm walking.
It happens. Yeah. No.
Yeah. So it took a lot of reflection.
And now, like, you play pickleball.
Yeah.
You run at the gym.
Yeah,
like,
at
you're
5
going to the gym
a.m.
each day.
Yeah.
And, like, that just must have cultivated so much, like, you are so much more resilient because of that. And that's just, like, a beautiful testament, not only what God can do, but, like, what you've allowed yourself to grow through.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really amazing. But I really also just want to talk about, like, you know, through that situation, you found internal peace with yourself and God. But what about, like, when we are in conflict with other people? Like, I think that's, like, for me, like, that's, like, the hardest part, because I have always been the type of person to avoid conflict. And maybe it's because, like, I think a lot of people think, like, maybe, like, Christians they're not supposed to be in conflict or something like that. I don't know if that's, like, a perception, but I've always been, like, a people pleaser, and I would be afraid to say no to things because I'm afraid that conflict will make someone angry or something like that. And for that reason, I've been, like, avoiding and escaping conflict. And that's something that we've been reading this book called Resolving Everyday Conflict by Ken Sandy, yeah. And he talks about, you know, how it's unhealthy to try and avoid conflict. So do you have anything you want to say about that? Like, can you help me? Because I'm still struggling with it, honestly.
Honestly, I mean, I've taken a class. I've read this book. Conflict, honestly, is just a part of our everyday lives, and it's how we approach it. So you said you have more of an avoidant. I have a very confrontational style.
Wow.
And there's, like, this arc pendulum type thing where there's both extremes, and then there's a middle ground. But getting to that middle ground, especially when you've been one way your entire life, is so hard. I mean, this past summer, I visited my brother and my sister-in-law, and we were, you know, trying to have fun as a family, and we were playing a card game, and emotions were high. And so and so my brother's also very confrontational, and I've learned you fight fire with fire, you're gonna get burned. The house is gonna burn down. So there was a conflict going on. I don't want to get into too much information because I didn't ask if I could get into the personal details of
you
it.
don't want to, like, air everything out on.
But I just remember I felt unheard, and I was getting really mad because that pride of, well, I should be listened to. I know I'm right. And I just had to sit there and take a deep breath. And I looked at him, and I was like, hey, because then it was my turn to talk. I said, I want to lay down some ground rules for discussing this now. And the ground rules are that we're not going to interrupt people. We're going to let people speak without interjecting. And another one is that we're going to intentionally listen to each other, because it's easy to hear words and someone's talking, but the whole time your brain's going,
I'm thinking of my next response.
Yes. And so the other one was just trying to approach it with love. And it really helped because we're both confrontational. So if we both kept going,
it just would have kept clashing.
Yeah.
And so. I think because when I was reading the book, he spoke on, like, you know, obviously that conflict is unavoidable, but he also goes into, like, what is conflict. And I'm trying to see, like, where did I wrote it down here somewhere, but he basically said, like, conflict is when people are, like, we battle with our desires, and it's when we want something and then that other person also wants it. And I think it also comes from, like, as humans, I feel like we're wired to have, like, this scarcity mindset. That, like, we and it creates this fear. And we also, like, have power struggles, like what happened with you and your brother. That was, like, a power struggle. Like, no, I'm right. No, you're not right. I'm right. And it creates, like, a battling of desires. And how we resolve that is where emotional intelligence is needed, because emotions at that time can be at its highest. And we have to have problem solving capabilities. And it doesn't come naturally. Peacemaking does not come naturally to nobody. So
No,
we have to, it is work. You have to put in work to it. And something that like I've struggled with conflict, like internal conflict with myself, is I didn't grow up with my dad in my life. And for me, like I've always wanted like that father-daughter relationship. So it's kind of like been like an internal conflict with inside of me, like seeing other people and their dads like having this great relationship, and it like I'm like, it makes me feel some type of way, and it actually like I feel angry at him. I mean, like I still talk to my dad, like I know who he is and things like that, but I never really I've only seen him like 2 times in my life. So for me, like I had to come when I started developing my relationship with the Lord, I had to like take that and really forgive him for that. Or unless I would be holding on to like this resentment and this bitterness that I can't, I can't be used by the Holy Spirit if I'm holding on to these things. So for me, like that's like some internal conflicts that I had to have with myself, and realizing that it only takes forgiveness to overcome that. So really getting into problem solving requires compromise. And sometimes you have to give up what you want so that there can be like a middle ground. But I think that problem solving, what we can do to aim to be like a better problem solver is coming like with empathy, like you said, and understanding. So is there like any like relational, you mentioned your brother, but was there any other time where you had to use like problem solving to kind of like come to a middle ground?
So I remember, I think I told you guys about this the one time, was I had a coworker, and I don't work with her anymore, but she was a higher level position than I was, and I work in office, so we have a hybrid type of deal, but with my job I'm in every day of the week. Well, weekdays. And so I got there one day, and some of my coworkers had come in, and they were only going to be there 3 days of the week. So they're doing their thing, and they had some questions about like customer calls and documents and everything, which I wasn't trained for all of that because I do something a little bit different. So I'd try and answer the questions, because there was one girl who really knew what she was doing, but she had school, so she wasn't in. And then our head person for our team was either sick or on vacation, so the only other person available was this higher up who was I don't know, she wasn't helping with the training. She was in a training for something. And so I would get up if they asked me and try and help them problem solve, because clients would escalate it. And then the head person would get in huge trouble, and none of us wanted that. We didn't want to get in trouble, but especially we didn't want her to get in trouble. So I went over and helped with some of those questions, or I tell them I don't know how to do that. And the next day I come in, and our HR manager was like, hey, we're just going to like move you a little bit, because I got some complaints about you standing up and talking to people while we were working. And I said, okay, but the thing is, I was talking about only work-related stuff, and so I just work, and I come in the next day. They say, hey, we got a complaint that you were talking to this person too much, so we're gonna move her farther away and just don't talk to her.
In elementary school.
Yeah, I know. And so I looked at them and I said, who's filing this complaint? Because everybody who's on the floor with me, we're only talking about work, and some of these are really complex questions. And so then the day ends, and there had been more stuff. And I was just so defeated. I got home, and I was up crying until 2 a.m. And I was talking to my mom I said, honestly, I might just quit, because there's this target on my back, and every day they're saying something new that isn't true. And I don't know why it's only me when there are people on my floor who are talking about non-work related stuff. And so she said, just go to work tomorrow, keep your head down, do what you got to do, because you're not doing that. And I went, okay. that's what I'll do. And I had messaged my friend the day before. I was like, hey, if I don't talk to you, it's nothing personal. This is what's going on. So she knew, because I didn't want her to get in trouble either.
Right.
So I go to work, and then everybody, like the one girl who knows the most is there. The head person wasn't there. Then the higher up was in the other room, and this client calls, and they're like really trying to escalate things. And these people weren't trained on it, and I definitely wasn't trained on it. But they couldn't get up from the phone call, because if they did, it would be a bigger situation.
Okay.
So I got up, I paused what I was doing because it could wait. I wasn't on the phone. And I went to the room where the person was, and they were paused in the training. They were having a break. So I said, hey, this is what's going on. Would you be able to come to the phone and help out? Because they said they don't have training. And I told them, I don't have training in this, so I can't help you. And we don't want it to escalate.
And how long have you been to the job? Like how new were you? Were you
I
pretty
think
new?
I was about a year and a half in.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But you do something completely different than the people that wanted you to handle the client.
Yeah, so I was doing legal document stuff, and they were taking phone calls for like placing ads and taking payments.
Yeah.
So I told us, I said, hey, like, I don't know what I'm doing for this. They just needed someone to get you, and they're all on the phone right now. And I figured she was going to say, yeah, no problem. I'll go do this. But no, so there's a room full of people, and all of a sudden she just starts yelling at me saying, you need to do your job, and you weren't trained for this, and you don't even know what you're doing, all these awful things. And there's a room full of people, and she never pulled me aside or anything.
Yeah.
Was just going after me. And that's right before that I'd found out that her and one of her friends had been placing the complaints, but neither of them were on the floor. And one of them had an office across, so they said, oh, well, they just saw me standing up, so they assumed. And the other person was like, well, they told me to place it, so I did. And it was just this huge thing. So I said, my viewpoint was I'm not going to give her the satisfaction of getting to me. So I walk out, and I went straight to a meeting that I had, because my meeting came up a few minutes later. And I'm trying not to cry. And then my one friend who was there for it, who is the trainer, she walks in. She's like, hey, are you okay? And that's when the waterworks really started. And she said, you did nothing wrong. Like, literally, you were just doing your job, and everyone there sees that, and the whole floor said you were doing your job, and that was not right for her to do. Like, that's not how someone should handle it, whether they're a higher
even
up
in a
or
professional
low.
setting.
Yes, in an office where it was a huge room, like 3 or 4 times the size of this.
Oh, wow.
Full of people, and they're all there. And so she hugged me, and I was just crying. My friend said, do you know? I said, no, I don't want to think about it. And I do my meeting, and I said, after my meeting, I'm going to go home.
Yeah.
And I'm getting ready to pack up my stuff. And she's like, hey, can I talk to you? And I was like, well, I don't really want to talk to you, but we might as well, because we need to talk about this.
Right.
And I go into an office with her, and she was like, oh, hey, I'm sorry about that. I realized it wasn't okay, but I did it because X, Y, Z. And then she kept justifying it. And I looked her in the eyes, and I said, I don't think you're a terrible person. I think you just didn't handle this well. And when you're trying to apologize, you keep saying but, and, if. And an apology is saying...
That's not an apology.
Yeah, it's like, what I did was wrong. There's no excuse, and I'm sorry how it impacted you. And every time she'd say, well, this is the reason why. Well, X, Y, Z, X, Y, Z. And I literally looked at her, and I said, honestly, that's not an apology. Like, this is what one is. And so I said, if you really want to apologize, I will accept that. I said, I'm going to forgive you whether or not you apologize. It's just, this doesn't work. And I told her, too, I said, going forward, if you think there's something going on, you have my work chat, you have my email, you have my phone number, we're in the same office. Pull me aside or send me a message. If I genuinely am doing something, then I can be like, yeah, honestly, I'm doing that wrong. I'm going to fix that. Although if I'm not doing something, I'd be like, hey, this is what's going on. And so everyone on the floor, they said, no, she literally was just talking about work stuff. So we just had to talk it out. And I set boundaries saying, going forward, these are my expectations. Because a huge part of conflict I had written was it comes from a misalignment of expectations and execution between people and or ourselves. And so I had an expectation of a higher up if they have a thing coming to me, but I also have an expectation that in a professional setting, they're not going to scream at someone in front of a whole room of people. And her expectation was that I'm not going to talk about non-work stuff. So, and she genuinely thought that it was because someone was telling her that who wasn't there. And so she was like, well, you're not doing this work-related stuff, and you should be. And then she had been having a bad week, and that's another thing about...
She took it out on you.
Yes. If you just keep pressing down your emotions, it's going to overflow, and it's going to explode, and whoever's right in front of you, they're going to get that. And it just happened to be me the entire week. And so I think, setting expectations for yourself, for other people, but also boundaries. Because something I've learned is boundaries aren't just a good thing, they're a God thing. God in Genesis had boundaries. There were separations of things.
Yeah.
But and boundaries aren't meant to be a punishment. Otherwise that's a punishment. So if I were to come up to you and I'm a national news anchor, I say, "Hi, what's your name? Also, what's your banking information?
Like,
what's your
whoa.
login?" And I point it to you and you
Yeah.
said, "I'm not going to share that with you." I'd say, "Why not? I just asked you. I'm a news anchor." And what would you say if someone said, "Why won't you share your banking information on national television?"
Because that's private information. Like I don't want to get stolen. I don't
Yeah.
want to put myself in a situation where I'm going to get stolen from.
Yeah, exactly. And so you realize, because it's all about access and responsibility. They don't have that responsibility. You don't know what they're going to do. So since you have such a low level, you aren't going to give them level 10 access.
That's yeah.
And so conflict can also come out of maybe someone has a match level of access because they're responsible, but then their responsibility starts to go down, but this access is still high. And they're finding ways to misuse that, whether it's gossip or taking money, treating people a certain way, whatever it is. So you're supposed to lower the access, but not in a way that's punishment. And that's really hard to figure out because you have to navigate it in real time. And a lot of people won't accept it. And that just means that they're not emotionally healthy enough to accept something that is beneficial for someone because they just want what they want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so true. A misalignment of expectations happens so many times, and it's a lot of the times like miscommunication. But like in that situation, your boss, like her emotional intelligence was very low.
Yeah.
And it's not healthy that she was bottling up her emotions, because I tend to do that too. And then you have like this outburst of anger, and everyone's like, where is this coming from? Like, are you good?
Yeah.
But I think maybe I get it from my mom, because my mom, like, if she has like a bad day at work, she'll come home and then she like sees the house a mess and she'll just blow up on us.
Yeah.
And it's not healthy. And it's like the way that it comes across is like it makes you look bad.
Yes.
And I'm pretty sure like everybody was looking at her like she was crazy because she blew off on you. And there was so like, especially being like in a higher up position, you have to have like enough emotional intelligence to say, okay, well, let me take her aside and speak to her in the office and talk about this further, because I keep putting in complaints and she's still not, doing or complying to what I'm telling her. So I'm going to challenge you a little bit. Like, do you think you were in the wrong? I mean, like, because obviously she was wrong, but like, would you think you're in the wrong at any point in this scenario?
I've tried to think about it because like my work, I don't have to be on phone, so I can pause whenever I want to and it doesn't impact the client thing. And the way I had looked at it was they were asking questions where some of them I knew the answer to. And once I didn't, I would just say, hey, I don't know how to do this. But she wasn't available when a lot of those questions came. And so I was trying to think about, so like, was I not, I don't know. Because, go ahead. Sorry.
No, because like in a work setting, it's kind of like impossible to try to control every conversation that you have with other people. So, I mean, but at the same time, like maybe I should listen to my higher up because like she's the boss of me, okay, but like she's also a human, so like and she can't control you in every single thing that comes out of your mouth.
Well, part of the issue for that whole thing was she always would tell people, if you don't know, like ask someone. If someone doesn't know, ask another person. And so I was like, well, she tells us to help each other, especially if a client's trying to escalate it and someone's not available. And like I had really putting an effort to not talk about non-work stuff because I know like that's been an issue for people. And so, I mean, could I have not gotten up as much? That's just the struggle with that is my desk was in a different spot. So unless I'm yelling across an office,
it's just not conducive for your situation.
And so I've tried to think, I'm like, well, is there something I'm doing wrong? But I didn't even know who was placing the complaint. So I couldn't even talk to them about it. I found out afterwards. So
they were just like doing this she never came to you with this problem?
No.
Until she blew up to you about it? Wow.
which was a huge problem. That's why I said I had that conversation with her. Like, you have all these ways to communicate with me. And I said, and there's no communication. So I was like, how am I supposed to know there's a problem? Like, because, yeah, there's complaints. But if you aren't telling me, I don't know who to talk to about it. I don't know who, like, I can say, you can talk to this whole room of people. They can tell you, we're just talking about work stuff.
Yeah.
But I think it all has to loop back to, like, self-discipline, because if we can't control our tongues or our emotions, if we let our emotions drive us and then we explode on someone, like, that's not right. Even if we're upset, even if we're having a really bad day. I know I've done that before, where I'm having an awful day. My family member comes by and I just, they're like, yeah, we're going to leave you alone.
I've had a horrible day. Why would you do this?
Yeah. I'm like, why did you do this?
Yeah.
And then I feel really bad afterwards.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Yeah, navigating relationships can be tough, especially like the ones at work. And like with Eric, I'm engaged, so like so I'm like trying to figure out like, okay, like how do I navigate this marital relationship, you know? So, and like there's conflict, obviously conflicts arise every day. Like I even trying to plan a wedding, choosing colors can be a conflict. have you like, Eric tells me, we want the colors of the wedding to be blue and pink. I was like, blue and pink? I don't want, like, this is not a baby shower.
Oh my God. Did you say that to him?
Yes, I told him that. And he's like, no.
Oh
and then
God.
even picking the day of the wedding can also be a conflict. So it's stressful because it's like your desire over my desire, who's going to win? And then that's where like the compromise comes in.
Yeah.
And the problem solving. So
yeah.
Was there a compromise or like a problem was the problem resolved? Did she continue to place complaints on you?
So no, what happened was when we were talking about in the office, I was like, hey, like, this is what happened. I said, I'll wait in here if you want to talk to everyone and ask them. I said, so going forward, like, if there's something going on, talk to me about it. And I said too, I told her, I said, I don't hate you as a person. I don't think you're an awful person. There's clearly a lot going on and it's not fair that was taken out on me. So I was like, going forward, I said, these are the expectations. Yeah. And I told her, I was like, these are our expectations. And if like there's an issue with this, with the expectations being met, there's going to be more conflict. And that's not what I want, especially like when you're working and it's all stressful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And most of our days are spent, like a good portion of our day is spent at work. So that can be stressful as well.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to talk more about like emotional intelligence. And what do you think about that word? What does it ring? What does it like when you hear that? What do you think of?
So what I think of the first time I heard emotional intelligence, I thought of IQ. Because what is it, like intelligence quotient? I could be completely wrong. But I just remember people would place so much of a person's value in their intellect on their IQ. When I've seen people, they actually did one show. It was a ranking thing where people rank themselves. And they say, who's the most intelligent? And they stand in a line. And they were judging someone because they literally said, like, if you're in the army, you, like, aren't smart and all this stuff for military. And I looked at them and I said... that's not right. But anyways, they talked about skills they had and the jobs they had and different skills, and then they had everyone take IQ tests, and they kept ranking the one guy the lowest. And I think he had the highest one, and the girl who said it was the second highest maybe, and the girl who kept telling everyone that she had the highest IQ actually was at the bottom. And she's like, well, I'm a doctor, I'm XYZ,
I'm a doctor,
I like all this stuff. And I thought, wow, that sounds really conceited and really prideful.
Just because you're a doctor doesn't mean you have emotional intelligence.
Yeah. And like the guy who was getting just absolutely ragged on talked about how it's also important to have discipline. I don't know if he talked about emotional intelligence, but he never retaliated at them. He just took it, and he was like, listen, I know who I am. So when we take this, like, if that's who you think I am, cool.
Just
but
like humble, like he has this confidence within himself. Yeah. So for me, like emotional intelligence is being able to problem solve. Is being able to put your pride down when you know that it's like getting in the way, like being aware that you are being prideful. It can be how you resolve conflict, like and what you say when you do get to a point where you're really angry. Like how are you able to express your emotions, and how well you do it is a sign of how, emotional, intelligent you are. Or being able to identify what you're feeling, that is hard.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because sometimes I'm like in like a weird funk and I'll just be like, well, I don't really know. Like, I don't want to talk to anyone right now.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, okay, well, what feeling am I like? Why do I want to isolate? Like, what is that? What feeling am I having? And maybe it's just like, maybe, I don't know. What does that mean when I want to isolate?
Yeah, and I think one of the foundational things is recognizing emotion, whether it's you or others. Because if you can't recognize any emotion, well, someone had said too, they just had pictures of eyes where you could see different expressions. And it was like 40 or 50 something. And you can tell so much without seeing the rest of a person's face if you have that emotional intelligence.
Oh, yeah, being aware of like the energy in the room.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like what you were saying before we came in here, like knowing when to like be quiet, knowing when to like talk and things like that. So that's it's hard to navigate, but you have to like continue to practice it in order to get better.
Yeah.
So yeah, emotional intelligence, it's like a lifelong journey. It's like right now I'm not really that smart when it comes to like handling my emotions, but
well, I would say it's not about being smart, it's about just like gaining experience and knowledge in it. Because like as you grow, like even if you aren't emotionally intelligent, it doesn't mean like people think, well, oh, I'm so dumb because someone's more skilled in this than I am. But it's just that's what people have experience in, and like there are people who devote their whole lives to learning about something and they don't fully know it, and like that's how we learn from them and gain it. So I wouldn't say it's not being smart.
Okay, yeah. Also just learning from experience. Yeah, and something I also want to add is like admitting when you're wrong. And I think that's what the lady at your job, she had trouble with that. She could not admit that she was wrong. She was adding like, there's a way, like you can't say but when you're giving an apology. Oh yeah, sorry I ran over your bike, but you should have never left it in the middle of the road. Like that's not an apology.
Or like I have two family members who are really just like they've had conflict for a while, and there's one person who says, well, I've only ever wanted an apology, and one person says, well, I will apologize. I'm going to say I'm sorry, but, or because you did this XYZ, that's why I said this, that's why I did this. And I talked to them and I said, hey, like that's not an apology. They said, well, I was right. And I said, well, if you want a relationship with this person, like you have to humble yourself. I said, because honestly, from what I've seen and what I've heard from knowing you, pride is this huge idol because you can't let go of not being right and you don't have control. I said, and that's why this relationship isn't there right now. And the other person wants to have one, but they keep getting hurt by this. So they have that boundary of access in their lives because you're not being responsible with it. The full apology hasn't come yet, but everyone's a work in progress. Yeah,
that's true. And another thing is that contributes to peacemaking is, and like that will end the cycle of revenge and wanting to get back at someone, because there's this like vicious cycle that like, oh, like this tit for tat, and the bigger person, like the one who has the most emotional intelligence, is the one who's able to forgive. The one who's like, okay, let me to put my feet, like let me put myself in their shoes and be able to see their perspective and say like, hey, this maybe you have some like unhealed trauma, and I see that, and because you're still dealing with that, I'm going to forgive you for what you've done to me, and I also hurt you as well, so I'm sorry for doing that. And that takes a big person for that, and it's not always easy, and we're still learning how to do that and implicate it in our lives.
And building off of that, something that I'm not perfect at this, something I've been trying to work on is, in the book, Ken Sande talks about whether you have 1%, 0.0001% of a contribution to this conflict, you need to own 100% of that. Like you need to take ownership, and like you need to be humble and come to them about it, but also not be a complete doormat where they just steamroll you. But something I've really been trying to work on is whether it's 100% or 1%, trying to like take responsibility for that, and it makes a world of difference when it comes to that, because people are like, well, you've wronged me in this way. And if you just say, well, you did this to me, like if I'm not actually going to do this, I wouldn't do this. But if you, I don't know, said something like, I think the Patriots are better than the Bills. anyways, you wouldn't say that, but
Go Bills.
and go Bills. And I was like, you're so wrong. I just punch you in the face. I know. So, I mean, so if you had just made a comment, like maybe we were just trying to be funny, whatever percentage, like if I owned up to my thing and you owned up to your thing, it's easier to find this common ground.
Yeah.
But if I'm going to say, well, you said that the Patriots are better and you're so wrong and how dare you and you've offended me and all this stuff, it's all about me.
Yeah, that's
It's
true.
not rebuilding
Yeah.
our relationship. It's not figuring out what, because people say it's not your intentions, it's how it's perceived. So your intention might have just been to make a joke, but I perceived it in this hypothetical as the end of the world. And so
I
that
have
was
a story for
misaligned.
this.
Oh, perfect. Go ahead.
Because I just went to like a Christmas festival at the chapel, and I went with my little sister, and we were waiting in line to go on the carriage, and I'm standing in line ready to go on the carriage, and then she like pushes my head like this, and I'm like, I look back, and then I'm like looking left to right, like who just did that? Because Eric was on the other side of me. I was like, did you just hit me in the head? He's like, no, I didn't hit you. And then my little sister's like, no, I didn't hit you in the head. And then they do it again. And I know it's my little sister. And I get so mad at her that I do it back to her. And I'm like, okay, I'm the older sister. Maybe that wasn't like, maybe I shouldn't have done that. But she, at that moment, like, I did that tit for tat that comes so naturally in our being. Like, why is it so deeply ingrained in us for us to seek revenge?
Yeah.
And it's just like that's what like brings back that concept. You know, peacemaking does not come naturally to nobody.
Yeah. It's so true.
And it's like I'm still like that was just this Saturday that happened. And I'm still like mad. She's like, I was just joking, like calm down. But like no, like I felt really offended that she hit me in the head. Yeah. Like, why do you have to joke like that? I don't like that.
Yeah.
So
it's all about how you perceived it. People say it doesn't matter what your intentions were.
Yeah.
Like she maybe meant as a joke, but you said that's not okay.
Yeah, exactly. And it happens like this.
Yeah.
But going back to forgiveness, I think forgiveness, it doesn't happen overnight, especially like if it's something like that's really traumatic. It definitely like it's a process. I'm thinking like what's happening in the Middle East right now.
Oh yeah.
And like how there was killings on both sides, and there's no room for forgiveness because there's just so much hurt and pain that's existing there, that it just seems like this tit for tat. Violence begets violence begets violence. It's just like a cycle, and it's not only this occurrence. It's been happening between them for years. And the crazy part is like they're neighbors. And what does Jesus tell us to do? To love our neighbors. Yeah. And it's just it's really heartbreaking. Like especially like how social media is like a big contributing factor. And there's so many different ideas. And everyone is just arguing like the UN just it just vetoed a resolution for ceasefire. And I'm like, what is the UN for? Yeah. Is it just like this puppet for the US government? And I'm just like, oh my goodness. Yeah. I don't know. I just feel like I don't want to feel hopeless. I want there to be peace in the Middle East, you know? But like, how do you think that there can be forgiveness brought into or something that can end the cycle of this violence?
So, honestly, like forgiveness is such a huge thing. Like I've heard people say all the time, and it might sound corny, like forgiveness is a poison you drink and only you are getting hurt. But I also think about how hardened our hearts get. I mean, even me, when I don't want to forgive someone, the way I view them, they don't care what I think of them. It's not hurting them, but then I just have this hardened heart and this heavy weight, and I'm always angry, and I'm just overwhelmed. When like forgiving, it's not to make the other person feel better. Yeah. Like if you punched me in the face and I forgave you, like, you know, it's not. It's all right. You're not gonna stay up. You're not gonna stay up at night. Yeah. I also think another important aspect of forgiveness is there's transactional forgiveness, which is where someone says, I'm sorry, and you forgive them. But some
Yeah.
people never apologize, and that kind of reminds me of the trauma and just the ways people wrong us, because some people will never give an apology, whether it's pride or maybe they realize it and they pass away and they never got to apologize. Whatever it may be, like, I think a huge struggle is people think, I deserve that apology. I need it because they wronged me and they hurt me. That just goes back to pride. And so, like, honestly, I just feel like a huge thing would be forgiveness, and it's not going to happen overnight. And the thing is, even if one group forgives the other, there could still be this going on. But, I mean, killing people really isn't the way to go about it. These attacks,
Yeah,
all
the
sorts of
innocent,
things.
the
Yeah.
innocent people that are like the collateral damage of people's pride and their desires and what they think should happen. So it's really sad, but I think in the Western culture, we kind of like, we're so obsessed with individual rights that it kind of like clouds our perspective, or clouds like how, like, if how it keeps us from being like empathetic in a way, because we feel so entitled all the time to having this right, and you know, and it's, I feel like sometimes we have to just let go of that and be able to compromise on human, like, especially when it comes to human life, you know, like how much are we willing to sacrifice just to get what we want? And like, what are the costs of that? Like, these are lives that that are being lost for what reason? For money? For power? It's just ridiculous. But
something I think, and that it reminds me of, I'm going to take 2 pens. I'm going to be fancy here, give a visual.
Nice.
It's what does our world revolve around? Is it me in the middle? Because if it's revolving around me, there's no space for anyone else. There's no space to love other people, because it's me. It's me-centric. I am the center of the universe. Everything revolves to serve me, to benefit me, and anything that doesn't, kick it into space. Or when it's God-centered, God calls us to love other people even if they hurt us. And so when he's in the middle and you're revolving around him, there's an abundance. There is so much space to love people and forgive people, because you aren't focused on yourself in the center. And so I found that to be really helpful. I mean, I get selfish sometimes where it kind of goes.
We all do.
It switches it up, and I have to humble myself and admit that I'm wrong. And part of conflict management is telling the other person you're wrong. You can admit to yourself you're wrong. You can admit to God you're wrong. But can you actually be humble enough to admit to that person? Because that can help with reconciliation. It's not a promise they will. But someone says, I think they said, like, an apology and forgiveness, like, makes reconciliation. It's something along those lines.
An apology, well, admission and forgiveness.
That's what it is,
Yeah. And I think, you know, we are called to be agents of reconciliation. And to cultivate that peace, but also address what the issue is. Like, what is the heart of it? How can we get to the root of it so that we can figure out what avenue of problem solving that would work best for both parties. And that's the hard part. The easy part is getting back at the other person.
Oh, the amount of times I wanted to do that. I'm like, I just want to be petty. I just want to do this.
Right?
That's going to make it worse. It might feel good in the moment, but it's like, do you care about short-term gratification and long-term consequences? Move this way, there we go. Or delayed satisfaction for long-term, like, satisfaction. Because you work towards something and you're building it along the way, so... You know, I'm not just going to punch you in the face. Because maybe, I mean, I don't want to punch you in the face. It's just, or a sibling, and you're like, well, I'm just going to hit them back. I'm going to X, Y, Z. But you're damaging that relationship. Also, they might punch you back.
Yeah, and I've been trying to make a better relationship with my little sister. So I'm going to go work on that later on. But, but oh my gosh, that short-term gratification is so big, because that's like, sometimes that's all we can see in that moment. And a lot of people are stuck in jail for that. Just because they let their emotions override what they like they acted on their emotions, and now they're like they have life, you know.
Yeah.
And that's crazy.
Yeah, well, that reminds me, I don't even know the show. My friend was watching it. We were somewhere, and this head detective, he said there are 3 motives for murder. It's power, money, and and sex. And so he was like, whenever you see
just loving my spouse.
yeah, they say crimes of passion, whether it's that or money or a power struggle, and that all goes back to pride, and that all goes back to self-discipline. And we think about conflicts we have with our siblings. It might be a power struggle. It's not going to be that last one, but it could be. Maybe, yeah, it's just.
But another thing is like sometimes people like lack respect,
Yeah.
and you have to tell them like. You need to tell, like, especially my little sister, if you're watching, hello.
I love you.
I love you, but sometimes you can be disrespectful, and I'm supposed to be your elder. You have to respect your elders. And sometimes I don't get that from her. And I'm supposed to tell her, like, this is not how you're supposed to act.
Yeah.
And I'm probably going to be helping her in the long term. But, you know, I also cannot go down to her level and, like, be like, oh, okay, you want to do this to me, I'm going to do this to you back. Because that's not setting a good example either.
Yeah. Well, it reminds me of our group chat with thing I was talking about the other day with some of the kids at youth group and all the disrespect that's been going on and just the frustration because we're like, we need people to know that they'll be safe. We want them to be able to learn our God. We also we want to people to feel welcome, and there's this disrespect, and we're their leaders, and we don't want it to be this totalitarian, is that word, I'm going to mess it up, or a dictatorship. And I remember Danielle, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, Danielle. My brain is, actually, no, I shouldn't say that's justification. I'm sorry. And so because we had a talk with them, but then one of the other aspects was, oh, well, you guys aren't going to get access to this part of the building for the thing. And Danielle had pointed out, she goes, well, that's manipulation, like that's punishment. And so how are you lovingly showing them this when you're making them, it's like it's legalistic. And it's not showing them love because they just see punishment and they see just this power struggle.
Yeah.
And so like I'm actually getting to know them better and say, what do you think about this? Like, what are ways we can help to encourage you? What are ways where if this problem happens, we can approach you in love instead of just banging down a gavel and saying like, you've been judged.
Yeah. Coming from a place of love. We weren't supposed to talk about it, like, but let's talk about what is love? Because love is such a big word, and it can be so strong. But there's so many different types of love. Like there's agape love for Abba Father, and then there's like love for your parents, like romantic love, but something that one word that can encapsulate all of it.
I'd say action.
What is your love language? Is it
quality time?
Really? Quality time? Okay.
It was like quality time and then words of affirmation and then physical touch and acts of service, then gift giving. I love to give gifts, but I'd rather give them than receive them.
Oh, no. Interesting. For me, it's acts of service, quality time, words of affirmation, and then probably physical touch is like the last one. I'm very don't give me a hug. But no, because now I'm realizing that hugs are so beneficial for you. Like you're supposed to, we're supposed to hug someone. Like we're supposed to receive hugs for 8 times a day.
Yeah, for 13 seconds, I think.
Yes, and I feel like so much better when I just get like a hug from someone. Like it reminds you like you're not alone, and you don't have to go through this alone.
Yeah.
Like when I'm having a bad day, like hugs actually make a difference. Yeah. So this has been amazing talking to you about it. Talking to you about like what peace is, conflict, how to manage conflict, our different experiences going through conflict, how to put our pride down, emotional intelligence. I definitely think this is beneficial, like especially like going forward with my relationship with my sister and us bickering all the time and how I don't feel respected. So just trying to set that example of how to come from a loving place, because love does have the final say.
Yeah.
Do you have any last words?
Yeah, I was going to say, do you
before-
mind if I talk about some inner conflict?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So a lot of times people think conflict is just between two people. Some people might say it's between humans and God is another aspect. It's so multifaceted because we also have inner conflict. And something we've talked about in our group chat with all our voice memos, there's a lot of them, is I've had this inner conflict for over 10 years of I so much enjoy singing. My favorite thing is to sing worship music. And for 10 years, I've wanted to help lead. Although I had these lies in my head that you're not good enough. What if people compare you to your brother? Because my brother sings and plays guitar. And I'm like, well, what are they going to be like? Oh, do you sing and play guitar like your brother? Genuine fear I had. And then just certain people were in other places. It was very cliquey. And just literally speaking death onto myself.
Wow.
Like when I went to the gym and I ran for the first time since last year, and I kept looking at the clock saying, I can't do it for 2 minutes. And then the next day I said, you know what? I can. I'm not even going to look at the clock. And then I did it for like 2.5 minutes.
Wow. So you did it for longer than when you expected.
Yeah. And I just told myself I could, but I was putting all these limitations on myself. And so with worship music, for the past 10 years, I wouldn't even sing in front of my friends unless we were in a car. I'd sing in the shower, but I was so scared. I let fear rule my life. I let it chain me down at the bottom of an ocean and just drown in the overwhelming emotions, thinking I'm just going to stay there the rest of my life. And I went to this conference and I was talking to one of my friends and I said, I have to do it. I have to face my fear because God, like success in God's
doesn't tell us to be afraid.
Yeah. And also like, I mean, it's not a prosperity gospel. So if I'm in obedience with him, it doesn't mean I'm going to get everything I want. He just calls us to be obedient. And he can use that in so many ways, whether you become a worldwide pop singer or you crash and burn and they say you have the worst voice we've ever heard, being obedient. And so I decided, I was like, I need to message our head worship person.
Yeah.
So I messaged her and I said, hey, I've been really wanting to help out for a while. Can I meet with you? And she goes, yeah. And I remember the first question she asked, help me to face my fear though, was because she knows my brother really well. She said, oh, do you sing and play guitar like your brother? And I went, no.
Oh my God, please don't compare me to him.
And I think I knew that was going to happen at least once. So I braced myself and I was fine. It just went in one ear out the other.
Yeah.
And I said, oh no, I don't. I only sing. She goes, okay, that's no problem. So I made it this huge problem because I believe these lies because they're screaming at me. Like they're so loud and they're overwhelming. And something I've learned is God's voice is not a scream. It's a quiet voice. It's peaceful. And if you get so used to listening to the screaming lies and you can't recognize the peaceful talk, you're going to get overwhelmed. And so spending time with him and learning who he is and learning to hear his voice, whether for some people that's audible, for me it's not, but it's something that moves in my soul. Learning to listen to that still,
quiet
peaceful voice, has helped me so much. And now I help out with worship for middle school youth group. I'm actually leading this week.
Oh,
and
nice.
yeah,
And for
I'm
worship.
like, I can do this. I've never done it alone before. And there are those lies coming back with the inner conflict. And so I've been going to practices for like the main Sunday group. And I feel so at peace and so at home when I'm singing to God, whether it's just a microphone and maybe an acoustic guitar or it's the whole production with a band. That is where I feel so at home. That's and I feel so much peace in my heart. Yeah.
That's
and
amazing.
So I'd highly recommend if you have inner conflict, really try and work through it and don't let fear take over your life. No. Fear of others, fear of what they'll say, whatever it is, because genuinely it's not worth it. I let fear and holding myself back be that instant gratification instead of getting long-term like satisfaction. So, yeah.
As Zach Williams said, fear is a liar.
Amen.
And this is Talking Peace Together. We've been talking peace in truth and in love.
Yeah. Okay. Let me see. I was going to say, I don't know what any of the buttons are. I trust you.
I think there was a button here.
Usually, I mean, if there's a big red button, maybe not push that one.
No, not the red button. There was supposed to be like I think it's everything. Fade to black.